You're listening to Orange Blaze, a Florida Trail podcast.
Every time I would go and get on the Florida Trail, it was like the siren song just leading me deeper and deeper in. It's like, oh, well, I've seen this. Well, I need to go check out this area. And it's like, oh, and it was kind of like just kind of clicking things off. And it wasn't necessarily that, I see a lot of times when you're like, people go and be like, oh, I need to do all these peaks or, blah, blah, blah. You're kind of just checking things off the list. And yeah, okay, it's rad adventures, I get that. But the Florida Trail wasn't really like that for me. It was just like, it was a drug that I could not get enough of.
That was Sean Runbum Blanton, a 2020 Florida Trail thru hiker and ultramarathoner. And I'm Misty Ridley Little, host for the podcast. Sean is no stranger to the Orange Blaze podcast, as he was a guest on episode 22 last September. At that time, he came on to talk about his ultra running, trail advocacy, and volunteer work, and how he was prepping for the Wild Florida 120 race, an ultra marathon he created on the Florida Trail. Sean is back on for another episode to chat about the Wild Florida 120, but also about his fastest known time / only known time of the Florida Trail just a few weeks ago. Sean, with the help of a few people crewing for him at road crossings, ran and hiked the Florida Trail to set an assisted FKT of the Florida Trail at 22 days, 7 hours, and 28 minutes. If you listen to Sean's first episode, you'll know he lacks no enthusiasm for what he does and for the Florida Trail, and that comes out in this episode as well. This episode is my longest one yet, so feel free to break it into 2 listening sessions or save it for a long walk around your neighborhood during these pandemic times. I was having Skype issues when I recorded with Sean, and we opted for the easiest method of recording, which was by phone on Google Voice, so the audio quality isn't my usual. Other than that, you'll be just as excited about the Florida Trail after hearing Sean talk about his hike and all that he experienced along the way. All right, on to the episode.
All right, so you're in Atlanta. I saw you posting some stuff from like the Virgin Islands and stuff. Was that just old stuff you're sharing, or were you actually traveling there recently?
Oh no, I really try to like right now, especially with this whole weirdness that we got going on. I've just been trying to post a lot of the photos and videos and stuff of places I've been, kind of to remind myself, how beautiful life can be, and also to share stuff with other people. I think a lot of people are stuck inside right now, and people are kind of, just on their phones and on their computers or watching TV, and, hopefully it makes somebody smile or gets the wheels turning for what to do, when life gets more normal. Yeah.
No, I've been enjoying what you've shared because it reminds me just how much you get around. And I think I was also struck by how much you get around because as soon as you finished the Florida Trail, you were off, doing another race, and then you had another race you're going to be doing. And it's kind of you go and go and go. So I don't know. I mean, you must be totally spinning your wheels now that you can't go and go and go.
Actually, yeah, it's funny. It's really hard for me to like stop and be still, and that's right now. I'm kind of in the boat that obviously most people are in, is that we're kind of just this forced time to go inwards or just to slow down, and that's the hardest thing for Sean Blanton to do. And absolutely. I was in pedal to the metal, from when we started the Florida Trail, and that was one of the reasons that I had to go as fast as I did. Is I took a couple days longer than I had wanted to, which I'm sure we'll get into here in a little bit for various reasons. But ultimately, I had a 3-week break in between. Putting on events, running events like I do, and basically it's like, you can do this. So it's like, dreams of the AT or PCT will probably never happen because I just do not have the time or the ability to take, 45 days to 60 days off at any point,
Right. So now, I know you've canceled at least one race. Do you have any that you think you're going to hopefully be able to make, or are those still up in the air?
Yeah, so I don't like to use the word cancel. We're postponing our event, which is it's kind of weird. So the one that we just had to postpone is the first event that I ever put on ever. It's called the Georgia Death Race. And I know you talk about the AT a lot, and we actually finish at Amicalola Falls State Park. Which is where essentially the AT starts. I mean, it doesn't technically start there, but the approach trail starts there. We pass right by Springer Mountain. We don't get on the AT, but we cross it a couple times, and it's always like my birthday weekend, which is the last weekend in March. And so it's kind of, this would have been year 8, I believe, and it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, it started off as just this crazy thing that, you know, I wanted to show people how North Georgia had very difficult, challenging terrain that, you know, stands up to Western, stuff, you know, so we kind of put this out as a, you know, kind of like, shut up guys out west with your country club trails, like well manicured trails. Like we got hard shit out here too. And ultimately, it's a 74 mile point to point race. It started out as like 64 miles, and we've added some other trails on it. So yeah, that race itself that's my baby. I mean, they all are, but you know, this was the first one. And, you know, I guess, I go big on things like, you know, it's like, you know, I think right now is a bad time to get into race directing, but you know, I never started with like a 5K race or a 10 miler. The first event I ever put on ever was 64 miles in North Georgia with no cell service. So, everything that went wrong conceivably went wrong. And so like a baptism by fire. And, so yeah, we had to postpone that, and then I've got 3 other events. One's the last weekend in April. The second one is the second weekend in May, and that actually is held in Grayson Highlands State Park. Again, if you're an AT hiker, we go all over the Grayson Highlands, not on the AT though. We cross it, I think, like 8 times, which the AT through Grayson Highlands is amazing, but you have not lived until you've spent time doing all those trails. There's wilderness areas all around that. I mean, just hundreds of miles of trails up in that area. And I'm fortunate enough to spend about, like, I would call it 3 weeks a year, maybe a little more, kind of exploring and doing stuff up there. And so we basically have the first event that when the park opens back up, we kick that up and donate money to the park and just have an awesome time up there. So that's likely to get rescheduled to September now. Yeah, this whole thing is kind of kooky, but you know, we're rolling with the punches.
Good. So that's good that people are still going to be able to race, hopefully, and all things, you know, going back to normal, hopefully. We'll just have to, I guess, wait and see on that, but that's good that you'll still be able to host the race, hopefully, in a few months. So, well, I guess I'm kind of be working backwards here in the timeline. So now you have more time to recover from your Florida trail hike, but I guess maybe we can just talk about that. Like you put on the Wild Florida 120, but you also right after that did a Florida Trail FKT. Why? I know you kind of, speaking from with you last time, you've kind of fallen for the Florida Trail and started enjoying it, but what made you decide to, you know, finally decide to hike it and to make it an FKT attempt?
Well, like first of all, gosh, like I started thinking about that probably like a year and a half ago. I would call this the Goldilocks Trail for distance, at least, for through hiking. You know, it's 2,000 plus miles. Like you look at these bigger trails, AT, CDT, PCT. That's a long ways, and that's a really big dedication for time and just like, I think, mentally. And I'll get into this more about kind of like losing, you know, motivation, you know, through the trail as I was doing it a little bit towards the end. But, you know, I think when you're trying to, you know, in your mind before you're doing something, you know, you try to go through every stage and every step, you know, in preparation, like what you think at least you're going to experience and what you're going to do about it. at least that's what I would think that anyone who actually finishes like a long distance trail probably has done or should do. All about visualization and stuff. But when I start thinking about 2,000 plus miles, I'm like, fuck, that's daunting, right?
Yeah.
1,100 miles, like it's just right. 5, 8, Arizona Trail, 800 miles, that sounds pretty rad too. I think that 800 to 1,200 mile range is pretty cool. And that's kind of what originally attracted me to it. And as you noted earlier, I've done a lot of traveling. I blow all my money on traveling, all my credit card points, everything. And I go run, hike, whatever. Lately it's been more walking and hiking than running, which I'm changing right now. I'm trying to get back into running shape. But yeah, I just like exploring and seeing stuff that other people like don't really get to see. And all my events that I put on, they're not really in popular places, or if it is a quote unquote more popular place like Grayson Highlands, we go times of years where no one's out there, hardly.
Yeah.
So I try to take people to these wild and scenic places, and not because we're trying to come in there and, like pave a highway through there and, have a big rock festival or anything like that. The whole thing is taking people to these areas so they can appreciate them and hopefully protect them and share that. I mean, that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
It's for the public to enjoy. And for me, the Florida Trail, it's like every time I would get out there, I was dating a girl in Florida for a while, and every time I would go and get on the Florida Trail, it was like the siren song just leading me deeper and deeper in. It's like, oh, well, I've seen this. Well, I need to go check out this area. And it's like, oh, and it was kind of like just kind of clicking things off. And it wasn't necessarily that, I see a lot of times when you're like, people go and be like, oh, I need to do all these peaks or, blah, blah. You're kind of just checking things off the list. And yeah, okay, it's rad adventures. I get that. But the Florida Trail wasn't really like that for me. It was just like, it was a drug that I could not get enough of. And it was like every time it blew my mind how it could get more scenic, more remote, and less people had been places that I was going. And I'm like, how is this even possible? So that was kind of the mentality that I had when tackling the Florida Trail. And, I'd looked at some other things as well. The Smokies 900. Maybe somebody could pay me to do that. It's like Great Smoky Mountains National Park has I think it's like 700 miles of trail, but there's no way to do all of the trail. Like I think the least amount of miles that you can cover on foot to do all of the trails is like 900 miles.
Wow.
And I looked at that too. That's still pretty interesting to me. So I guess that's kind of what led me to that, and spending a bunch of time in Central Florida, I mean, it's not like you go someplace one time and you see it. Like Juniper Prairie Wilderness, I've run through there like 5 times now. Every time it is just as awesome.
Yeah.
Tosahatchee, same thing. Seminole Ranch, same thing. So I found myself getting kind of bored with all this stuff in North Georgia. I've done it, countless times. And ultimately it was just like, yeah, I was really excited to just go explore in Florida. And I had this basically 24-day stint or maybe 22 days that I didn't have to work, and I could probably go do. So that was the game plan.
Right. So I guess why did you decide to do it as, I guess, a supported and versus an unsupported? And I know basically listening to your other podcast that you're not really hung up on the whole lingo around it, but because I know people are hung up on that lingo, I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on, I guess, why you went the route you went. And I know you had at least one person crewing you, but did anybody else help you out?
Yeah, so that's like one thing that is kind of interesting. Let's talk about the route that I took. So going northbound, like I wanted to finish on the beach. I wanted to finish in Gulf Islands National Park at Fort Pickens. When I was a kid, every summer we would go for like a week and a half to Perdido Key and Johnson Beach, which actually is on the other side like if you're at Fort Pickens and you're looking due west, if that, Gulf Island has a gap and then it hits another side and then that's still Florida, that's where I went every summer as a kid. And you could see from the high-rise condo that my aunt owned at the time, like she let us stay there for free, you could see Fort Pickens. So, and the whole Pensacola Bay and everything. So it kind of had this cool, thing in my mind where it's like, man, almost like I'm coming full circle back to my childhood, and that was a pretty motivating factor, for me. And, one of the reasons that I was fully, crewed is, I actually have, dietary restrictions. For the last year and a half, my stomach has been really messed up. Like I get random acid reflux, like horrible, like for a week, and it's just like almost throwing up stomach acid. It'll burn my vocal cords. I can't talk. Sometimes I aspirate it. It gets in my lungs and I can barely breathe for a couple days. And only actually on the Florida trail, like doing all that just horrible beat down, but mileage, on my body, it actually I found out kind of what's bothering it. It's refined sugar. So, I was afraid to even, go a day, by myself, but also and I know a lot of people will be like, oh, I really don't like camping. I have a messed up shoulder and I'm spoiled. I respect the heck out of it. And I think more people need to do it because, we need to get back to nature and people need it. It's a forced slowdown like right now. And we need that. People need that, it's like the older generation and, young people don't really go camping. They want like instant gratification. And so, I love the idea of it. I just can't get comfortable, unfortunately. So,
right.
I did car camp a couple nights. That was horrible in the back of my Tacoma.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Oh, that was horrible. But yeah, and I had a guy, I should have said that before anything else. Like, it wasn't just me doing this. Like, I would not have been able to finish the Florida Trail without Joey Delgado, who was my crew chief. He pretty much put his entire life on pause for a month and change, to come down and help me do this. And, he lives in Ohio. He's, Puerto Rican, but from, he lived in Homestead for most of his life. So, he was, I don't know, it's really cool, after the fact talking to him because it was like, oh, you spent the whole time with him. It's like, not really, because I would see him for a couple minutes, like at a road crossing, and then I wouldn't see him for 3 or 4 hours, and then I'd see him again, and it was a very unique experience. I mean, I would call him if I had service and be like, hey man, you doing good, blah, blah. It was pretty stressful at times, like really stressful. Like, dude, do you know where you're going? Blah, blah, blah. And I failed horribly like about 8-9 years ago, for the Appalachian Trail FKT. This is before people were really, really doing it. Cause I had a lady miss me 4 different times in the first 3 days. And and it was like, gates were closed, like Forest Service gates were closed. It shouldn't have been closed. Like there was blowdowns preventing her to get to me. And, it was a nightmare. So like, that's what I was coming off of, even though it was a long, long time ago. And that's what I had, imprinted in my mind. And so I was freaked out. I was like, dude, you're going to miss me. And, that caused some friction. He's like, I'm not going to miss you. And I'm like, you need to use the Gut Hook app. And he was like, no, I've got like Google, printed maps. And I'm like, well, the Florida trails. Yeah. So anyways, that was interesting. And he never missed me in the whole time. He never missed me. He was never late.
Oh, that's so good.
He killed it. And he, sometimes he would come in and I would be like, Joey, you okay? And he'd be like frazzled as hell. Like, I just got here 2 minutes ago. I had to drive 2 hours around. And I'm out there just like, oh, cool. Look at this bald eagle over there. And I'm like, hey, Joey, what's going on? He's like, you're never going to guess. I'm like, oh, well, I just saw, so it was a crazy dynamic. And, I'm sure both of us will look back on that, in a couple of years and be like, wow, that was epic.
But yeah, right. So you were staying in a hotel pretty much every night, or a motel, or any kind of sleeping arrangement other than your car, if it's possible, right?
Yeah. So night one, we got to Billy Safari, and I made this. Well, first of all, the bed of my truck in my Tacoma is exactly 6 feet. Okay. However, because there's a liner, it takes about maybe an inch and a half off that. Well, I'm 6 feet tall, so I can't lay fully laid out in the bed of my truck. So what I did is I had this foam mattress, and I had to cut like a good 6 inches off of it to get it to fit in the back of the truck bed. And I got a camper shell on it too. The problem was we had so much crap in the back of it, that we basically had to, anytime I would try to sleep in it, I have to take everything out of that, put it, on the side of the car, hope that, nothing was going to bring, anything from bears, panthers to, bobcats, coyotes, ants, whatever, to start eating on that. And, so the first night when I got to Billy Safari, I was like, man, I'm pretty beat up, but I feel fine, this isn't too bad. And I'm ready to go to sleep. Well, that first night it got down to 48 degrees.
Oh man.
And I don't do well sleeping in cold weather. I typically sleep in high 70s, in my apartment or wherever, and it helps me acclimate to warmer weather. And, so anyways, I can't really produce a lot of body heat when I'm not moving and sleeping. So we had one of those little chickadees or whatever, chickpeas, from them, and it's awesome, awesome little setup, unless it's 48 degrees, it's completely open air. Oh God, it was awful. So he slept in there, and I was like, well, screw that. I'm going to jump in the back of the truck. And so I got in there and I was jammed in there, and everything was, revolting against me on my body. My hips were locking up because I wasn't able to fully stretch out, and I kept waking up shivering. And finally at 4 or 5 in the morning, I shot out to him. I was like, man, fuck this. I got to start moving. I'm getting hypothermic out here. And so anyways, we woke up and there's freaking raccoons were all over the truck. They're trying to get in the coolers and everything. And, I opened up the back window of the Tacoma, and it literally pushed one of these raccoons off it. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell was that? So, that was kind of funny. And then I just started walking, and had a beautiful sunrise through the reservation. But yeah, that was a really bad night. And then the other night, it just screwed me up because I didn't really sleep, maybe an hour or two. And then Hopkins Prairie, right there at, Pine Island Campground or whatever, crashed there as well. I slept maybe 2 hours, same thing, got super cold. But then it got really humid, the humidity in the back of the truck, I couldn't even see out of it. Everything was all fogged up.
Oh, yeah.
God, that was horrible. And then I woke up, went to go use the restroom. My legs were so beat up that day. Went to go use the restroom, and my, doing number 2, and, TMI, but my legs seized up. I literally fell over, rolled the shoulder, and barely missed falling in my own stuff.
Oh, my goodness.
But yeah, we pretty much, besides that, we would stay in hotels, and listening to stuff from Jupiter and that Dan guy, one of the advantages that those guys have when you're trying to go for a hiking record is that whenever you want to call it a day, you just stop there. You don't have to do any extra hoopla. You don't have to do any extra miles. You're there. You're done. So when I would get done, it would be okay, now we got to drive anywhere from, 25 to, an hour and 25 to go someplace to sleep. And, that's one way. And then it's cooking dinner. And then, it'd be 3 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours once we finished to when I would actually get to like lay down and go to bed. You know, and I think also it's like, you know, I was not running the whole time. It was mainly walking with road running and shuffling when I could. You know, the goal would always be 15.5-minute miles. If I was on the road, I was doing anywhere from 12.5 to 15-minute miles typically. And then if I was like on trail, it'd be anywhere from 14 to, you know, 25-minute miles, you know what I mean? So yeah, it was nice to stay in hotels. And, one of the nights too, I woke up, my parents actually came down for the last like 6 or 7 nights, because it was Joey the whole time, except for one of my friends, Hunter, came down for a night, and that was great. But, yeah, so my parents came down, brought our little wiener dog. I call her Jade, the party wiener dog. And so that was super cool. And so I didn't have it booked, like I didn't have hotels booked out in advance. Like each day I would kind of see, okay, like where are we going to get to? This is the goal. And then like I would literally be walking down the trail and booking a hotel for that night.
Wow.
I'm like, yeah, it would be kind of funny because I didn't want to like waste money. You know, I had a budget, right? So I didn't want to waste money on, you know, oops, we didn't make it there. There's someplace closer. So, you know, I just, that was what ended up happening. And then the one night that I let my dad book a place, I woke up at like 1, and this was like, you know, it was 4 or 5 days ago. It was actually right near, it was in Fountain, Florida. So it was like on the road walk.
Mm-hmm.
And, we ended up booking out this little, I don't know, he booked out some like motel thing that was on a lake, not actually on the trail itself, but a bit of ways. And we ended up waking up because I was in one bed, my parents were in the other, and I woke up during the middle of the night and I was covered in fucking bed bugs.
Oh,
it was like
no.
a nightmare come true. It was horrible. And I'd had bed bugs one other time in my life, but I didn't have anything in the room. Everything we had was in the room, and it was like, well, so it just ruined the next like 3 or 4 days. So anytime I would have a really bad night's sleep, it would be like, okay, I'm not going to hit my goal of 50 plus miles for the day. And it would just, and not only that, cause it's like, oh, cool. You have this goal. It's like make 50 miles. Yeah. Heck yeah. That's the goal. But at the end of the day, like the whole point is having fun. Right. And you know, even though it's going to hurt, and it would just kind of ruin the fun. I'd be in a shitty mood like all day long, and just not, you know, just, it wouldn't be fun because I'm so haggard. So.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, you're talking about having to drive sometimes, you know, 30 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes to get someplace. What time are you getting on trail and leaving trail that day? How many hours are you trying to hike/run?
So I think like the longest day I ever did was like 16 hours. You know, it started off going super early. And then as things kind of progress, you know, it's like, in retrospect, Joey and I think we both agree that like having another person the entire time really to help Joey, like maybe having them do like meal prep, like whatever, just to help him so that he would get more sleep and also things would go a little quicker. You know, but we started off like the first, you know, in Big Cypress, you know, I was at the Oasis Center at like 4 a.m, right? Or like 3:30 in the morning, got hit with a massive storm. But yeah, it kind of just kept getting pushed later and later and later. And I was just fighting this like never ending uphill battle with sleep deprivation. Like I was in just such a debt from, as you mentioned, directing a race like 4 days or 5 days before I started the trail and, you know, doing all this other stuff. So it just kind of got pushed later and later. Some days I would, if I knew there was like an easy day, and by easy day, I mean like, okay, we got 40 miles, 50 miles on the road. Like that's an easier day for me because it's like, hey, I can actually run.
Right.
And so, yeah. And then I listened to the podcast with Dan, who was talking about, who has self-supported, FKT. I was listening to that. and one of the things that I heard him say is he was fearing the night. And it's like, God, I can relate to that so much because, you know, I would get in this weird thing about 2 or 3 hours prior to sunset being like, I need to get as far as I can. And then I would pick it up to like pretty much an uncomfortable pace and would kind of like blow my legs out. And it would actually ruin me for the next day. Like my pacing was all over the damn place. Like I ran like an idiot pretty much, but, and I paid for it like severely. But yeah, so it was kind of all over the place, and I just would look at kind of like what we had coming up the next day and today, but at the same time, you can't be paralyzed by the decisions, you know, you can't be paralyzed for your current decision based on what might or might not come tomorrow, right? Like you got to just play what's in front of you. So, you know, there's a lot of strategy in it, but at the end of the day, it's like you just got to keep moving forward, you know?
Right. Now, I think you said something that you came out with no injuries after all was said and done. So is that, am I recalling that correctly?
Yeah, 0 injuries. I had one small blister on my pinky toe, like around 4 days in, but put some KT tape, and it was fine. Granted, my Achilles and my calves were so damn tight. Like I thought the last 4 days was like, these are going to snap, like for sure. I just was like meaning to stretch every day at the end of the day, but I was just so dang tired. But when I would stretch, it was like, oh man, I would feel so much better. And actually the other thing I was pretty stoked about was I did not take any NSAIDs. So I didn't have any Advil, Tylenol. It was just CBD drops and THC drops. And that got me through the whole thing right as rain.
Perfect. So do you think that just because of your history of all these, of your running history, do you think that's what helped prevent the injuries, or is it just that you were lucky?
No, 100%. Yeah, there was absolute no luck to that. I pretty much never wear socks anytime I'm running unless it's raining or wet, or I'm going in sand. Like I don't ever wear socks, and so my feet, and I've done that for a very long time, and I don't recommend, like, hiking boots, I feel like are like, I feel like we're almost past hiking boots, right? Like most people are using trail running shoes now. You know, when you're breaking in a shoe, you probably want to wear socks. But I always tell people, it's like, if you want to build up calluses on your feet, which some people like, some people don't, they protect you from blisters, true. But one thing I recommend is like slowly weaning yourself into it, right? And so like I'll start off and I'll run, you know, just a road run or just a walk in your neighborhood. And when you feel like, and you have a pair of socks in your pocket, and when you feel yourself even the slightest inkling of a hot spot, stop, put your socks on, then keep walking. Once that goes away completely after 5 to 7 days, time to try it again. You know, it's just like training for anything. You know, this whole Florida Trail thing, it was it was so much needed for my soul, because like I've been injured for so long and from running because I sit all the time. And I told myself last January, that's like kind of when I started doing, you know, I was like, I'm going to do this Florida Trail thing, and you know, FKT aside, I was like, I just want to go finish it. I got 3 weeks, so you have to do an FKT. You know, like, you have no choice. Like, you either finish it in this time, or you're going to stop early and you're going to regret that for the rest of your life. And so I couldn't run, so I would just go out there walking. I started off a mile to walk a mile. Then it got more and more and more. And yeah, like once we got to the trail, like I used every trick in the book, you know, from using a super powerful headlamp and, you know, to, if I was hot, staying wet. You know, if, you know, a lot of people, if you're hiking, people are afraid to dump water on themselves, maybe because they don't have enough or whatever. But, you know, I stayed wet. I, you know, did things, and I used the whole mentality the whole time I was doing it. I kept saying, bend, but don't break. So like even
Yeah.
through just the heat just bearing down on me, through Kissimmee Prairie and through like just south of Orlando, it got hot as hell and it would slow me down, but I wouldn't stop. So, yeah.
Yeah. So now looking back after doing this trail, what do you feel different? What do you feel that is different now than before, about the trail? Like seeing the new sites, obviously, your own personal just transformation and soul changing issues, not issues, but transformations, I guess. I don't know where I'm going with this.
What did I gain from that? How did I change?
Yes.
For sure. I'll tell you about that. And then if we have a second, I'd love to just kind of just give a quick, what the heck happened the whole time. I'll give you a couple of funny stories, but,
for sure.
I think, like I just said before, is like, I needed this for like my soul, like mentally, I needed this. And for me, I have never been in that much pain in my entire life combined. I mean, as I was every single day. There was not a single day that went by that I did not cry. But, one of my favorite quotes is by this guy, Eric Thomas, and he was like, if you're in pain and you're crying, it's paraphrasing, it's like, don't cry to give up, cry to keep going. And sometimes I would be crying because I was hurting so bad. Other times I would be crying because I had just let something go. And it's when you are on your body's brink of just being completely broken, you kind of let go of everything. And you just kind of, if you stay with it long enough, you kind of just keep going through and you become one mentally strong person. And again, I hate to use the word through hiker with myself because I feel like it's not fair to the people who do through hike. I feel like that takes away from them. Whatever I did, labels aside, like I did the whole trail, on foot, even though we were going off to go to hotels and I was being spoiled like that. But I had such an amazing experience with just the things that I saw. And as I started to get further into it, my goal was like, okay, I can't wait to catch up to the through hikers. And I ended up catching up to a bunch of people who are like, hey, are you that guy running? And I was like, yeah. So, I mean, like that was kind of cool. But the biggest thing is, and I think the difference between what I was doing and what a lot of people do, and it's probably just, it's who I am, but I tried to share on social media every single day, my whole journey. I actually even took a photo per mile on the mile, more or less, and I saved them in my phone. So I have like about 1,100, 1,200 photos in my phone, that I saved as favorites, and I need to figure out a way to make like a little slide of that. But yeah, I just, there were so many times, and it's not so many times, it's just the entire time I wanted to give up. But there was this strong desire within me that was like, I don't care what happens, I am not going to give up. And when I got to the point where I was like, man, I probably 7 days in where I was like, my body's not working. I got to River Ranch. We stayed there one night, which is an interesting story. But on the Kissimmee, and I literally, Joey pulled up the car and I went to get out. I could not weight bear on one of my legs. And I was like, this is it. I'm injured. It's over. And I was like, can you get closer to the room? And he said, yeah, sure. And he didn't know why. And I literally crawled to the room. And that was like he thought I was embellishing a little bit. And I got in and I was like, my leg is throbbing. I was like, I was angry. I was like, this is it. And, later that night I was like, you just gotta like wake up. Every day is new. You never know how you're going to feel. Every day would just be pain. And I tried to fight the pain. I tried to take my mind somewhere else, like doing yoga stuff or whatever, try to just disassociate with my body and go somewhere else. And every time I did that, it didn't matter. I would still come back to being in horrible pain. And it took about 10 days, 12 days, 14 days for me to mentally accept that this is going to hurt every single day, like the worst pain of my life. And it is never going to get easier, period. And once I accepted that, it was like now I could move forward, and focus on other things. But it was, I mean, God, like every day it was, life presented me a new problem to solve and multiple problems. So it was like the whole time I was just thinking like, okay, how can I solve this problem? How can I make this better? How can we get through this? And sometimes it was like, okay, like this is a very simple problem that's only like, a half mile or something, or where are we going to get aid into this? Or, just small things. But other things are like, oh man, like I can barely put weight on my left leg. And, it wasn't like, oh man, my knee hurts. It was just like, man, my quad is just blown up. So some days I would do 50 miles on one leg, and other days my legs would be shot. I would get out my hiking poles and I would do the whole thing on my upper body. So it was just, I had this mentality that was like, I don't care how broken I am. I'm going to continue to crawl tooth and nail until I get this done. And that was just what got me through. I've never done anything like that in my life for that long.
Now, you mentioned the pain part, and you mentioned listening to Dan's episode, and I think you said you've listened to Jupiter's. Have you ever talked to anybody else who has done an FKT before, like even to prep when you were prepping for this? Did you get their perspective, or is this all your experience is new and you haven't been able to even like kind of digest it with anybody who can share that experience?
Yeah, actually, the only person I asked, and I think it's the only person I know that I would ask about that. Well, actually two people, but really the person I went to was Carl Meltzer. Speed Goat is one of my good buddies. I've known him for 10 years. And I kind of just asked him some general questions and, kind of like, hey, like, what should I do every day? Should I go for time or distance? He goes, pick the places where you're going and then do whatever you do to get there. And I'm like, all right, that works out. So every morning, I had everything pretty much plotted out, on my A goal, which was, hey, do this in 20 days, 15 hours or whatever it was, which obviously I totally blew that by like 2 days, because of bed bugs and not sleeping a couple of nights because in my car. But yeah, so I asked him a couple tips and tricks and whatnot. So, but yeah, most of it was just kind of stuff I had experienced and was going out there and just kind of baptism by fire a little bit, right? And actually, And actually, I'll tell you one thing that I really learned is I kind of, like the last 2 years I've watched the hiker guys go out for the FKT, chasing Dan's record, and I forget the guy's name last year. It was like Aresh or whatever, the Indian name kind of guy. Anyways, I had a blast following his adventure. Man, damn, that was cool. And I also followed that Turbo Stash guy last year and this year. And I was like, I watched him go out and he did 50 miles day one. And I was thinking like, that's way too fast. Like if you want to average, 50 miles a day, you don't start off with 50 miles a day, or if you're trying to average 45, you don't start off with 45, you start off with like 38, 40, right? So my whole goal was kind of like slowly work into it. And I knew that if I could get to Orlando, if I could get to Tosahatchee and my legs were not blown up, that I was going to finish this whole thing and things were going to go pretty well. And the funny part of that is as soon as I left Bull Creek and hit the Mormon Road walk, God, I was messed up.
So now, did you end up having any favorite places or sections that you might not have known about before?
Yeah. So one thing is like, you know, I look at, again, I follow a lot of stuff people have done. Pretty much before White Springs, going northbound, I had done probably 60+% of the trail. I would say maybe 60% of the trail. But I hadn't done much past that. I'd done all of St. Mark's. I had done the last 20 miles basically of the whole trail. But there was a lot of stuff that I was like, oh, this will be really interesting. And, you know, it kind of motivated me to get to it. One of the things I was really excited to get to was the Swanee River. And I'd only done like 7-8 miles along that. And I just assumed that's what it looked like the whole time. God, that is the most underplayed section of trail in North America. From, I really think like from Olustee Battlefield all the way to the end of the Swanee, whatever that distance is, I think it's like 100 miles. God, that is awesome. And going that direction, I'm glad I was going northbound because it just got more and more scenic. And like the massive oak trees, oh my God, that was incredible. And, you know, one of the nice things about going to every day, because I wasn't having to set up or break down tents or camp or whatever, is every single day I was getting this just epic, if it was available, if it was clear, I would get this epic sunrise and sunset. And I just, every time I would just be walking through it or running through it, and I would just stop and be so appreciative of that. And the Swanee was no different. There was a section I came up on, I want to say it was like Holton Springs or something like that. Does that sound familiar maybe?
Holton, I'm thinking about the Holt camp. I'm not sure if that's coming up correct, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's right before you hit Osceola, section of that.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
not Osceola. Is it the Osceola River? It might be the Osceola River. Because in the Swanee section, you hit the Osceola River for a while, don't you?
Yeah, it's right after the Swanee is Osceola.
Yeah. So, anyways, like, whatever river that was that I was on during the middle of the Swanee section, before you get to Swanee State Park, Swanee River State Park, man, that was absolutely incredible. Like, I came up on this one spring, and all those, I think you had commented there, all those rain lilies were all blooming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I came in, and again, like, you just don't see anybody on these trails, you know, and I came up on this, and there was like this spring, and I thought it was like an oasis. I was like, this is a place you would literally come to and be like, I need to start a religion here. like 200 years ago. I mean, it was just awe-inspiring, and, yeah, you know, I was chasing a storm, trying to get done with the Swanee section, because I basically did like 50 miles or 55 miles along the Swanee, on one day. And at the very end, whatever the last section is, like, you pop out, run down a dirt road, and then you turn back down to the river and back up, which was just absolutely horrible and unneeded, but, yeah, it was completely mud the whole time, like this fence line. It was like, it was pouring rain, but that was by far my I would say my favorite day for sure.
Now, did you have any issues? I know because you weren't using a InReach or a Spot or anything like that. Did you have any issues with people like tracking you down and taking your time and any kind of things like that, or were you pretty much just running into whomever just happened to be out there and they didn't know what you were doing and you were just crossing paths?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the thing is this, is like, I didn't carry one of those Garmin InReach, A, because I didn't want to buy one, but B, also because I ran with a GPS watch the entire time. And then, so my Kuros that I bought, which I haven't owned a GPS watch, like, literally ever. But I bought that, it recorded everything the whole day. And then, you know, just in case people were like, you didn't do that, or you gave your watch to somebody else, or blah, blah. I actually took Gaia GPS. I would take geolocated photos with myself in it, or you could see my hand with my watch and my hand tattoos, which nobody else has. just random sections, typically when I was like further out in the middle of nowhere, where it's like, oh, you can't just like walk up here, walk out, you know what I mean? And then I did take the photos like every mile on the mile. So if somebody wants to be like, oh, you didn't do it, like, okay, cool. Like, whatever, dude. Prove me wrong. You know, that's not really why I was out there. As a whole, it was just to have an epic experience, and going for an FKT, if you will. It's not even FKT. The only known time is really the more accurate description of it, because no one has done that supported.
Right.
Which makes what Dan and those other guys have done is just absolutely incredible, you know, like, holy shit, you know, but anyways, I digress. But yeah, so that was kind of what I did. And I had a friend, Willie, Syndrome is his name, goes by the name of Nature Boy is his trail name. God, maybe 10 years ago, he was going self-supported on the AT, and he was doing updates. Well, somewhere, I want to say in like Virginia, northern North Carolina, somewhere like that, he got actually drugged out of his tent during the middle of the night. 2 or 3 guys beat him to within an inch of his life. Somebody else found him the next day, called the cops, had to come get him. He was in the ICU for like a week or 2, like just all kinds of messed up. All because people were like, on White Blaze or whatever, that whiteblaze.net, they were just like, you should only do X amount of miles per day, blah, blah. You know, I've had death threats from people before because we put on races on quote unquote their trail on public land. So, you know, that's something that like really kind of resonated in my mind, where it's just like, you know, I don't really want people knowing. So like I wouldn't put an accurate, like I did 52.3 miles a day, because then somebody would just add it up.
Correct.
But realistically, like, you know, if you've been on the Florida Trail, you see where my videos are, you probably get a good guess of where I was.
Right.
But it just kind of gave me that extra little buffer, like just in case, you know. So yeah, and we had some really interesting, or rather Joey had some interesting interactions while waiting for me at trailheads. You know, he's Hispanic, and you know, it's like, that's another funny story. Like, I came up to road crossings at least 6 times, and he was with a cop because they didn't believe the story. Yeah, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Hey, man, how's it going?" You know, and they're like, "Oh, you are telling the truth."
Wow, that's like funny, but also so horrible. It's just,
totally, yeah, profiling for sure. But you know, at the end of the day, we kind of laughed about it. I'm like, Joey, are you getting arrested again? Like, what are you doing? But yeah, I'll tell you, you know, just to kind of give a quick rundown of like everything that kind of happened. I'll try to be like 5-7 minute range. But so basically, I was supposed to start, I think I started February 7th. I can't remember right now. It was 7th or 8th. But anyways, we ended up pushing it back a day, because we weren't able to get to, down to South Florida, you know, in time, because Joey lives in Ohio. He literally drove through the night. I was putting up stuff for our event. I just got all the stuff, like loaded up, cleaned up, blah, blah. My other co-race directors drove it back to Atlanta. And he drove through the night. I slept in a hotel in Orlando, and he got there in the morning, literally had slept for a 30-minute power nap. Okay. And then all of a sudden, I'm driving down to Naples. He's in the passenger seat, and we're trying to get to Naples because it's like, okay, we need to go do all this shopping and do all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. And, ended up getting to Naples, like, I think on like a Wednesday night, and technically I was supposed to start on that Thursday, and, or whatever day it was. And, I ended up, being like, all right, no, we're going to start on like Friday, or whatever day it was. And, that ended up giving us like an extra little day, but we were just like, go. We had to do all the shopping, go here, go there, blah, blah. Went over to the Oasis Visitor Center because I was still trying to have him, maybe meet me at like one of the road crossings, the swamp buggy crossings in Oasis. And I didn't realize that like you had to get permits and all this stuff. So that didn't work out. So it's like, okay, no worries. I'll just carry a bunch of extra stuff, like whatever, 30 miles, no bailout. I'm not worried about that. I've done that many times. So I actually had a friend, come and quote unquote pace, but he ran the Big Cypress section with me. And so that next morning he came over there, met us, and I had some friends who had just run the race, and they were like traveling Florida in their RV for a month. They came over there to cheer me on and see me off. So I had 3 or 4 people there, hey, way to go. All right, you got this. So we ended up getting over there, and it was essentially the largest fucking storm that they had all year, or within the last 8 or 9 months, okay? And so we get there, and we're like, looking at the Doppler, it looks like, it's one wave of rain. We just drove through that. It's not a big deal. Okay, the wave comes through. It's 4:35 in the morning. We take off, okay? And once we take off, it stopped raining. And as soon as we took off, within a half mile, Misty, all of a sudden it was like the heavens opened up, and it was sideways rain. And it's all the, Big Cypress had dried out the week before. You probably wouldn't even got your feet wet for the first 20 miles. And then all of a sudden, guess what? It is, standing water, not even a half mile in. So what should have been, something that shouldn't have been too bad ended up being just slogging through, and it was horrible. But it was beautiful. And so we made it through, I want to say 8.5 or so hours. Maybe 9. It wasn't too bad. Felt good. But yeah, and we ran into, they were doing a work day out there.
Oh yeah.
And so I was actually able to get some water from those guys, from Jeff Glenn. I was like, hey man, you guys mind if I grab some water? They're like, oh, cool. I was like, thank you so much. Telling them where blowdowns were. So we get to Big Cypress. The guy who's chasing me, Aubrey is his name. He went on his way, and I went across under 75 and went about my thing. And at this point, just started walking and was enjoying all the gators along that. And it started getting dark, and came into the reservation, and a cop actually stopped me along the road and was like, hey man, you all right? I was like, yeah. I'm out here on the Florida trail. He's like, oh, well, where's your pack? And talked to him. He's like, well, I just saw, a mother panther and her 2 cubs or whatever. He's like, might want to watch out. I was like, oh man, I missed it. That was my thing. I'm not worried about that. I wish I could have seen that, And obviously then we had the snafu with staying there that night. And then the next day, got on my way, and the worst part is I thought about literally the whole thing was, man, Lake O, those levees, horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. So day 2 I got to John Stretch Park, called it a day, and met another guy. It ended up walking in with him. I forget his name, but we were chatting for a while, and that was that. And went and stayed in Clewiston or whatever. The next day I knew it would be horrible. Went on, started running, had a beautiful sunrise from the Lost Trail, and ended up running into people who are running the Lost 118. So they run they circumnavigate Lake Okeechobee, and they were coming the opposite way. And these guys are haggard. And the funny thing is, I did not plan it out that way. I just had planned to come through there on a Sunday because I knew that, all the construction sites would be closed and I could just run through them, which I did. Mm-hmm. And I saw these people, and it was hilarious because, I'm just like, oh God, this sucks. I'm running into a headwind. These guys are 110 miles in, and I saw these people I knew. They were like, run bum, what's up? It was a bunch of people who would run my races. So it's it kind of felt like a little boost in celebrity status from that. It was just kind of what I needed at the time. And I had never been on the final portion of that Lost section. And that was the worst. I had probably a 25 mile per hour headwind for 6 hours. And it ate me alive. But I got all the way done with it, got to Paradise Run, and man, was I beat up. That was day 3, and I was just beat up. And the next day, we had done this in training. Joey had come down there back in a couple months before, and we had done this starting at Paradise Run and gone up all the way to Starvation Slough. Had to it was a shorter day but a harder day. So I pulled up short because I couldn't go into Kissimmee, and then that day really hurt me. Just getting back on gnarly trail again, it was like, oh Jesus! After 100 and something miles of levees and dirt roads. And, I was really contemplating just like stopping there. And the next morning, that was one of the nights I slept in the back of my truck. Again, didn't sleep worth shit. There was coyotes howling all night and rummaging in our stuff. And anyways, I woke up all early and I was like, Joey, don't worry about waking up. Like, I'll see you at Kissimmee Prairie, like this cowboy crossing. I got like a water pump, like it's all good. Take off. My headlamp within 2 miles died. And I was like, oh shit. And I have this massive bright headlamp. And my Wild Florida race had come through here a week before. And, our front runners had seen panther out there. Multiple people had seen a panther, coming into Kissimmee Prairie. And so I'm like, wildlife really doesn't freak me out too much, but when it's like 4 or 5 in the morning, there's a thick fog, my headlamp's dead, and I'm having to run with my iPhone light, I get a little weirded out.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of just creepy and, slow going, and you just laugh about it. Like there was only one battery in my headlamp, and I was like, what happened? Like, how did that fall out? Like that's what, you can't even make stuff like that up. And anyway, so I ended up just going super slow and kind of getting off, not really off trail, but just kind of like, okay, is this the way? Yep, we're good. And made it through that. And then it got super hot because I had slowed down. I was fully exposed going through Kisso. And that was a hard day. But when I crossed the Kissimmee River for the final time, like after the lock, and I crossed the river on the road on, 60, it was just magical for me. It was like it was like one of those points where you're just like, I crossed this river for like the 3rd time or whatever. And I don't really know what that means, but it definitely is a milestone that I'm really proud of. And that whole area was stuff that I had run multiple times. And, the next day I started in 3 Lakes South. I almost got killed multiple times, running down Highway 60. That was
oh
awful.
God. Yeah.
Oh God, that was horrible. And I just see these like farmlands, and it's like, why can't we go through there?
I know. Oh.
It breaks my heart, but I digress. So then I started the next day, 3 Lakes South, and that was the night that I crawled in to River Ranch where we stayed, and I didn't think I was going to be able to continue. So that really messed me up. And from there, I went from 3 Lakes South all the way through Bull Creek to 192, and that was a long day. God, that hurt. Yeah, and the hard part was like I told you, I had that little freak out 2 or 3 hours before each sunset. Well, coming into Bull Creek, that's the hardest, most technical part of that whole thing. And I was looking at doing a lot of it in the dark, and I started running, and, every step was like stepping on a landmine at that point. Finally got to 192. A buddy Steven came down, who's part of the, I think the Black Bear chapter, and he's a runner, and he came down, paced me a little bit, put me in a better mood. But I was just, at this point, I was like, man, the wheels are coming off, and it did not look good. And the next day, I actually felt a lot better running through the Mormon property. I was able to go pretty quickly, and that was kind of funny. When I was running, I had so many people pull up and kind of was like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you running on our road? It was nice, but also kind of like, why are you here? That was interesting. But I was like, hey man, I'm okay. I'm just, and they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, keep on. It's like, okay. Entered Tosahatchee, as I called the number. It was an organized hog hunt, one of like 5 days. Yeah, which I whatever. That don't bother me. People are hunting hogs with dogs. Like, you're not going to shoot me, but I ran into some the Florida man out there. These guys were like deep in the bush hunting, and talked to them for a while. That was kind of cool, and ended up having another really hard finish to the day, going into Chuliota, basically, or just shy of that. And God, that was a rough day. But once I finally got to the Cross Greenway, or whatever that is, Seminole Pass in Orlando.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, things kind of started to look up. I was slowing down, but I was still going. And let me tell you, I absolutely loved going through Seminole State Forest. Like, the next day, until I got through Swanee River from northern Orlando, or Tosahatchee, until I finished the Swanee, that was like my favorite part of the whole trail. And that's like at least a week, but it was all Rice Creek. Oh my God. That was incredible. And I just was having really unique experiences, like on a lot of these spots where I felt like, because I was kind of running a little bit and going at a faster pace, I was getting these just really unique opportunities for sunsets, and just that Palatka Lake Butler Trail. Like, as much as I'm sure most people hate that, there was a thick fog lying in on that, and it just, I was pretty freaking stoned going through there. To be frank, and it was like just a surreal experience. But yeah, and pretty much, to speed things up a little bit, after I got through, at that point, that's when I started kind of running into a lot of people. And what really, I think, screwed my body up the most was going through Juniper Prairie and all that area in the Ocala, because it was so sandy, and I was walking all of it, and I was having to pull, and it screwed up my hip flexors. So every night when I went to lay down to go to sleep, my entire hips and everything would just pretty much seize up and just would be throbbing so hard that I could not go to sleep. Like, whenever I would actually go to sleep, it would be because I passed out, and pain would wake me back up. So it would be like, I'd go to sleep in pain and wake up in pain. And, eventually my parents came, and that gave me a big boost. But the first 2 weeks, I had my eyes on the prize. I was good to go. Even though I was hurting so much, people were so encouraging online, and friends were sending me all these messages. That was arguably the best part, was I got to see how many people I got to be more or less a hero for, or at least an inspiration in some small aspect of. And that's what I wanted. I wanted people to see, hey, I'm not an elite runner. Someone should be able to do this trail in 18, 19 days. That's not me. It definitely wasn't, me with my stomach either, and bad sleeping. But I'm going to put myself out there, and I'm not going to give up, and I hope that inspires people. But, my parents, but I did lose sight. I would say the last week was really hard. There's all these roadblocks, and as a runner, the roadblock would take me a day. As a hiker, that sucks. Like, that's 2-3 days of just walking on roads. I got chased by so many dogs, like it wasn't even funny. Probably 50 dogs, and I had people almost run me off the road multiple times. People yelling at me, throwing stuff at me, calling me all sorts of names. Like, just stupid stuff that I feel like if you're a hiker, people probably aren't doing that to you. But it's just, that was an interesting experience. And when I was coming out of, like, once I got to Apalachicola National Forest, that's when I started having a really bad time. I did not like any of the trail through there. A lot of it was like incredibly overgrown. Actually, the only thing I really liked was being in the middle of Bradwell Bay Wilderness, like in that section they haven't logged. That was really cool. But, I was pulling ticks off me the whole time. I got 3 different types of ticks the whole time that I was on that. I got them off very quickly, like within minutes to an hour. That was good. But yeah, that whole Apalachicola just put this sour taste in my mouth, because my favorite oysters in the world are from Apalachicola Bay. And,
right.
I was looking forward to going through there because I hadn't been through it at all. And I just, call me sour or whatever. I absolutely hated that section. It was like painful, miserable, just nothing I hadn't seen before other than Bradwell Bay in the heart of that, which brought me to tears, by the way, reading on Guthook. Like, this has never been logged, massive trees. I mean, it was beautiful, simply beautiful. I mean, there's no words for it. But yeah, and then after that, I got that road walk to through Bluntstown, and that was like prescribed fire was burning my lungs. I'm trying to run through that, and then all of a sudden it just started like crazy sideways rain, flash flooding, and I finally got to what's that section? The Chipley, I think, Chipley River. Yeah, so I got to that, and right before I got to that, I was at a gas station I met Joey at, and this guy kind of pulled over and was like, "Hey man, what are you doing out here?" And I was like, "Oh God, somebody's gonna mess with me." And Joey is kind of like, "Hey man, I got a gun, we're good." And I could see him thinking that. And he's like, anyway, it turns out I think the guy's name's Eric. He's a volunteer for the Florida Trail Association. He helped clear out like a lot of that after the hurricane, and he was just really excited that he had run into like a through hiker. He hadn't seen anybody for a while. Yeah, and so I talked to him for like 10 minutes and took some photos and was like, "Thank you so much." And I was going to stop right there. Well, it motivated me to go through that. It's like, "No, dude, you want to go now? It's going to be flood stage." So I went through there, and it was so much rain, and it was in the dark. I couldn't see more than like 5 feet in front of me. And I was just following ribbons that somebody had put up there and just the hole in the canopy. And when I got to the other side, there was a gentleman waiting for me. It was Wilton, the guy who's the pastor at Hillcrest. He had drove down in the rain. He had been following me. He'd send me all these really nice messages. And he came down there, and he gave me the biggest damn hug. And I lost it. I was just crying. It was like, and again, I was like, I was going to stop there. I went another mile or two up the road and stopped for the night. But the whole thing with the Florida Trail that really amazed me was just how much love and how much care people that are part of the FTA and people that help out through hikers are. Like it, we see it on the AT. I do a lot of like trail magic, with our events that we do on it. We leave, food for people and, hook people up, in that sense. But this was like just on a whole nother level. And, the next day I ended up, just was beat up, kind of ran by, cause that was the night of the bed bugs. And I ran by the Hillcrest Baptist Church, and there was two hikers there, and they came out, and, we were chatting, they were cheering me on. It was so awesome. And I was like, "Hey, let's give these guys fruit. I bet y'all haven't had fruit." And you should have seen their eyes light up. Like that was the coolest part for me. It was trying to give other people,
trail magic
while I was, while I'm out there trying to push myself. So that was really cool. And then went through Econfina, and that was interesting. I'd done some trail work there to help out, and I was so tired. I literally slept on the ground for about an hour in the parking lot while my parents and Joey were there, and I ate about like a half pound of bacon and just passed out. And I was hallucinating at that point because I was so deprived of sleep at that, because I hadn't slept because of these bed bugs. I had whelps all over me, on my face, on my arms. Oh man, they itched. It was horrible. And hated the first 8 miles of it. Then there was some bridge I crossed over, and there was like bluffs over it. It was beautiful. From there all the way to Eglin, minus the road walk, was just epic, like Nakusi, or however you say that. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. God, it was incredible. And I I experienced something I'd never had in Florida before, which was switchbacks. Like, there was this section, where it's like a clear cut, and I was like, what? Are there switchbacks? This is nuts. And that was cool. Almost got run over running between whatever that section was and, Pine Log State Forest. Had a guy cut into oncoming traffic, and his mirror, like, pretty much brushed my shoulder.
Oh my God.
That was insane. And then had a pretty good time and got to Eglin, and the next day called it a day, and I was just so tired of being on this damn trail, and I had read something, another guy, I think he ended up stopping, but it was around 850 miles where he was like, I don't want to be here anymore. And somebody made the comment, that's pretty much what everyone gets burnt out. And when I read that, I was like, okay, I know that to expect that and just keep going. And so that's kind of what I did. And going through Eglin, it was just nice to be somewhere where everything was just so well maintained. There's a bit of up and down, like the bridges were awesome. Keith came out, and Kelly came out, it was awesome, and Keith's like the head maintainer for Eglin, and, I just kept telling him, like, you guys literally have the most well-maintained section on the entire Florida Trail period. Like, it is much appreciated. I don't even have to look up. Like, you'd be an idiot to get lost here. Like, no flow downs. I mean, so that was kind of nice. And, coming through Crestview, at night was kind of interesting. That's kind of hood. Nobody really told me that. Like, you kind of go through the hood through Crestview.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like crackheads going this way, crackheads going that way. I don't know. It was, I had some weird conversations with people from their cars, asking me like what I was doing. But yeah, and then got through Eglin the next day, and pretty much could have made a really, really hard push and just finished it in 21 and change days. But I decided it's like, I'm now putting my immune system at, compromising that. I've got to direct the race literally next weekend. And, I had told Joey, my crew guy, I said, I don't care what happens. There's one section in the entire Florida Trail that I want you to be on with me. And it's a 3.8 mile section on the dunes towards the end. And, we would have done that at night, and I owed it to him to take him in that in daylight. And he loved that so much. I think it was probably the highlight of the whole trip for him, getting out there on that. So yeah, the last day was, half day. It was just basically fun, like all the vibes, the good vibes, and I love the last 20 miles. Once you pop out of Eglin, even the last section of Eglin is really nice. And so, yeah, that ended up kind of jogging it in, and you've been just grinding for 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks, and just breaking my body down. And in my mind, the finish was everything I thought it was going to be, which was absolutely no one gave a shit that I was there except for me, my parents, and Joey. People were out in the park. People were riding their bikes down the the path and through the campground. And I had two people cheer me on because, my parents were like, check my son out. And it's like, don't tell them that. It makes me feel weird, like, whatever. I'm just some dude. And, it was all good vibes. And actually, I'll tell you one of my favorite things from the last day was I actually passed Peg Leg Pete's, as people were going in, like before the restaurant was open. And like, I passed this girl and she was walking in with her staff shirt on. I was like, girl, I've been running 1,100 miles thinking about Peg Leg Pete's, like oysters on the half shell. I was like, I got like about 6-7 miles to go, but I'm going to come back here and give me some oysters. You have no idea. And they were all waiting on the front step, like, oh, you're doing the trail? Like, yeah. And they're like, hell yeah. And they started cheering me on. So that was kind of cool. And, I think the last day too, my 50-mile PR is 7 hours and 2 minutes. I ran on Destin Beach, powered by oysters and Jack Daniels and Coke. So running on the beach is just like coming home for me, man. So that last day was just, I didn't even feel pain at that point. I was able, my goal for the day was to try to run hard and see if I could run the last mile at a 6-minute mile pace. And I did. So.
Oh, good.
Yep. It was awesome. And, went into the little shop at, Fort Pickens, and I had spoken with the lady before, like a couple months before. I had gone there. I wanted to visualize me finishing, and I left a really cool inscription kind of in her little logbook. So, and that was it. We finished, and it was midday. Went straight to Pez Leg Pete's. Had my first alcoholic drink in like 5.5 months. I drank all of 1/4 of a Corona. And I had 2 dozen oysters on the half shell, and was just elated to be done. And next day, on my way back to Atlanta to start work again.
Right. Wow, what an epic little, it's just an epic adventure, and everybody tells me their story. It's their, from their own perspective, their own transformations, and, whether you're taking it 3 months out or you're doing it in 3 weeks, the Florida Trail definitely offers. I hear so many of the similar stories, but there's also, that little personal tidbit that you can't express, but it leaves you with. So, but I get that when people are expressing how much they enjoyed their hike, or maybe not enjoyed it as much as they hoped, but it still leaves that impression. And it's been fun listening to you talk about all of that. And I just can't imagine the pain you went through either. That's just insane.
Well, God, it's just, pain was constant, and I think my biggest takeaway from all this and allowing my body to be a vehicle for this for people is like people who live in Florida didn't even know about, like, didn't even know about the Florida Trail. And I had a bunch of people like, oh, we can't wait to go get on it. And it's like, I just hope that we can use some of that momentum. Who am I? Nobody. But, I had a rad time, and I hope people, you don't have to go through hike the whole thing, just go check out some sections, and maybe that'll motivate you to do trail maintenance, and maybe donate money, or maybe somebody will see that, and maybe there's a way that we can figure out to close these road gaps. Because, at first those road gaps didn't bother me. I'm like, hey, this is free mileage for me to run. But then towards the end, I'm like, this sucks. Like,
yeah.
I'm tired of getting chased by dogs. I'm tired of getting almost run over, but as a whole, I have to say that trail is unlike anything I've ever done in my life. And I hope next year after, whenever it is, somebody goes back and they break that quote unquote record that I set, because I want other people to experience that, and if you're a hiker and you're listening to this and you're thinking about doing the Florida Trail, do it. It is amazing. The wildlife I saw, the things I experienced. One thing I listened to, last thing I'll say is, one thing I listened to when Dan was hiking, he was hiking for like 17, 19 hours a day. Most of my days were 12 to 14 and a half hours a day. And there was nothing that I saw in the dark that I wanted to see in the day. Like, I saw everything in the daylight and everything the way that I wanted to see it. So that was a huge plus for mixing in a little bit of running for me. But it's just, I go back and I really haven't had a full time. I haven't had time to digest it because I've been go. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here, because as we were talking, these little things that I had forgotten about, like they're coming back up in my mind, like, almost stepping on rattlesnakes a couple of times, and, just all sorts of like just weird, quirky things. But, yeah, get out there, people. Go check out the Florida Trail. It is hands down the most scenic trail in America, period.
Well, that is some high praise, but I do hope other people listening will take to heart. So, and thank you for sharing, all the details of your hike, and it's definitely, and thank you for sharing the details on Instagram too. I appreciated following that along. And if I took a day or two off from Instagram, I would poke back in and wonder, like, how far is he today? I hope he's not injured. And nothing happened. And there you were, still plugging along.
Well, I appreciate it. And the one thing I have to say, too, is I really hope Turbo Stash guy gets back out there next year, man. I truly enjoy following his everything. And, dude, third time's the charm, man. And somebody go out there and do that stuff again. And even if you're not going fast, just go enjoy it.
Right. Well, I do want to transition and talk a little bit about your Wild Florida 120 just a little bit, because that was right before your Florida Trail hike, and that was what we talked about when you were on last. So maybe you could just recap how it went for you, and how many runners ended up coming out, who won the race, if that's even a thing, and I guess just plans for next year if people want to join again.
So it went awesome. It went flawlessly as far as I'm concerned. And the guy who won it is Eric Keenley. He is a local to Orlando. He's one of my good friends. I was so happy for him. We basically, when I was training for the Florida Trail, he was also training for this race, and I was like, hey man, you need to be doing some hiking. And he actually joined me a couple days. We spent I think 8 hours one day walking through Tosahatchee, just pretty much doing every trail that you could do through there, with old road beds and just seeing some cool stuff through there. And then, Christine Topaz, I believe her name, Tokorts. She is from Colorado. She came and she won that, which is cool. We had initially registered, only took in about 120 people. This is not meant to be a large scale event, but the people that came down and ran it, came from all over. I think we had 20 or 30 states represented, and, people were just blown away by the beauty. We had some bad weather. It kind of rained for most of it. So when people were going through Kissimmee Prairie, Preserve at night, it was completely clouded over. So there was no stars to be seen, which is pretty much the only reason you would run through there at night.
Yeah.
Because it's a dark sky designated state park. It's another place people should check out that is super awesome. But yeah, so it went really well. And then we had this weird thing where we did 2 shuttles during the race, which, if you're through hiking, you don't have that advantage to do that. And it basically took people off these dangerous roadwalks, which I would never put runners on because that's not a good idea. But yeah, that was really cool. And it was a unique thing to the event that people hadn't seen before. And the one thing that people, really were, 2 things people were blown away by. One was the difficulty of flat, right? People see the word flat and they're like, oh, this isn't a mountain. A, it's not going to be beautiful, and B, it's going to be easy. Well, the footing is not really the best in Central Florida on a lot of the trails, with grass and stuff like that and roots and whatnot. So I think that really caught a lot of people off guard. But the beauty, oh man, people were just blown away, how, within 10 seconds you would be in a completely different, biome, all of a sudden you're in a prairie, boom, you're in an oak hammock, boom, you're in, a palm jungle, and the Goodwin hammock or Godwin hammock, so that was really cool. And like I said, the thing that tickles me the most, I've done a lot of these ultra marathons and stuff and explored this area. It's taking other people there and having them appreciate that while also accomplishing something very difficult that they didn't know that they could do. And that's ultimately what this race is for me, is showing people that. And the real win for me was we had 3 different Florida Trail Association chapters out there. We had Tropical Trekkers at the beginning. We had some folks from the Heartland chapter as well as the Indian River. But yeah, the Tropical Trekkers, they came out. Rich and Aubrey came out, and they were at the start of the event. Jenna from the FTA came out and gave a little talk, and it was magical, So a lot of times runners and hikers are sometimes it's kind of like skiers and snowboarders, but today or that day or that weekend, we were all on the mountain together, you know, like having a good time. So I was so thankful for that. And I'm hoping that next year, we're either going to kind of swap locations, like, you know, every other year we'll go back and forth, or we're just going to, do it again next year, same way. But I'm hoping that next year I'll be able to give some more money. We'll have a little more people, a few more people there, and give more money, especially to the tropical trekkers that is going to try to, there's a road walk between Chandler Slough south and east or whatever it is, north and south, but connect that to where it is one continuous track. And there's no road walk. So yeah, we're excited about that. Hopefully that'll happen. And I'm not the one doing it. I'm just hopefully giving a little bit of money that'll go towards it.
Right.
So yeah.
Perfect. So you think it'll be same time next year or same weekend at least?
Yeah, so like we had a really weird thing happen. Our finish line was supposed to be at Forever Florida. Well, Forever Florida, Doc passed away and pretty close to our event. All of a sudden Forever Florida closed its doors. So we were able to pass through there, but we weren't able to have our finish there. So it kind of left us scrambling. We literally just finished like at Highway 192 up on top of like a levee. And so it's just parking there was like non-existent. So I kind of need a place with a little more parking for a finish. So that's kind of what I'm looking at now. And I had wanted to finish in, one of the adjacent properties to Bull Creek, Triple N Ranch. But they do, which is awesome. I love it through there. And that's where actually the Florida Trail is being rerouted currently. It's already blazed as well. Which will take the Mormon Road walk out and unfortunately eliminate Tosahatchee, which is one of my favorite places in the world from the official route. But the problem with Triple N Ranch is that like, you know, they got like, organized hog hunts like every weekend, like mid-January to mid-February. And it would mean that we would have to put the event late February. And that's kind of, I get busier then, but also it's kind of like, man, you're starting to trend a little bit warmer, you know, another month of growing for everything. And so that's what I'm kind of trying to play around and figure things out. And, you know, while everyone's shut down, this is what Sean Blanton's thinking about is next year, the upcoming events, like, you know, how can we make it better? How can we, you know, that kind of thing. So hopefully early February. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I hope I'm glad it was a success because when I heard it was happening last year, I was kind of skeptical. I was like, they're going to do a what on the Florida Trail? But I'm glad it worked out, and I'm glad that, like you said, the hikers and runners are coming together. And I think that, at least in Florida, it seems like that does seem to mesh pretty well. And I hope that'll translate to other trails too. So.
I can't agree more with that. I mean, the biggest thing is we just all need to get out there and give back to the trails and get out on the trails and protect them. You know, it doesn't matter. You run, hike, bike, walk, you're on a horse, a unicycle, whatever, right?
Right. Perfect. Well, is there anything else you'd like to wrap up about any of this? Your FKT, the Wild Florida 120, what may be coming up for you after we get through this pandemic mess?
Well, I'll tell you, how about this? I'm going to tell you like two funny stories, and then I'll say like maybe something else, but I'll tell you the one thing that really, cause I had to turn off like commenting on my Instagram cause I was like, I was the victim of being on my phone like pretty much the entire time, I was on that cause I was actually having to do business calls while I was on the trail for like upcoming races. So like it was a work hike, right? But one of the things that really, God, like, I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? People, while I was out there, I was in the most pain of my life. I was like, I just want to finish this, right? People go, hey, look, dude, there's this like 3,000 kilometer trail. Like, you should do that. And it's like, that's the last thing that I want to hear right now. Like, what, you know, and it's like, I will fight you right now. Stop that. And then the other thing that was actually really comical, and I I don't know if I've ever had this high pitch of a scream before, but it happened. I was by myself, and it was in the Alfred track, which is just north of Buckman Lock. And yeah. And so basically I ended up it was foggy as hell, and I didn't bring my I had this Kogalla lamp, which is just stupidly bright. And I don't do any sponsors or anything like that, so there's no plugs. But yeah, and I just had my headlamp, and the fog was so thick that I could barely see through it, and it's just a spot that's just not used at all. And I'm running, I'm like, okay, and I'm looking on Guthook, and I'm like, oh, there's a big 90-degree right turn. And, knowing what I know about the Florida Trail and, trails in Florida, I'm like, that's probably going to be a roadbed. Nothing looks like that, And, anyways, I kind of couldn't find this turn. I was like, oh, it's kind of weird. It looks like it goes down to the left. Well, maybe it goes down there. And I'm like, well, it's a gravel road. It just looked weird. And so I kind of messed around there for a couple minutes. And then I was like, I think I just go down here. So I bombed down this little gravel track, right? And I was like, oh shit, here we go. And all of a sudden I'm like, I put my first foot forward thinking okay, this is going to be gravel. Well, it wasn't gravel. It's whatever that little moss is that covers the water, in ponds.
Oh.
And, yeah. And so all of a sudden it was I was running full speed down this little decline. It was splash, splash, oh God. And I scared the shit out of two gators on either side of me. And I scared them way more than they scared me. And I just went, ah! And and they went freaking flying the other way. And they're blah, 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 blah. I mean, it was just, it was funny. Yeah. So.
That's crazy. Well, thank you for taking your time. I know we've chatted quite a while, but I appreciate you taking the time out to talk about all this. It sounds like this is a good time to kind of decompress the hike too. So I appreciate you doing that on the podcast.
Well, yeah, no, and I appreciate it. I just had all these random things that I would narrate to myself through notes on my phone, and I hope I'm not gonna write a book or anything. I'm not trying to make money off that or anything, but I definitely want to write about my experience, and I think it's probably a good time to do it. And there's a lot of comical things and just a lot of crazy things that happen that I'll have to go back and think about again. But thank you for doing what you do. I actually listened to the podcast a bunch during the hike, which was kind of weird. It's I don't know, going to a concert, but then buying a T-shirt for that concert and wearing it at that concert.
At the concert, right?
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, and I always like to know when people listen to the podcast because, other than people talking to me on DMs or commenting on Instagram, I really don't have a clue who really actually listens. So it's really nice to hear that. So I appreciate that.
Well, keep it up.
All right, you too, and onward to the next trail.
Sounds great. All right, thank you.
That's it from our interview with Sean. If you're interested in the future Wild Florida 120 runs on the FT, do check out the show notes for where you can find Sean and sign up for his ultra races. The podcast website is orangeblaze.thegardenpathpodcast.com, and the podcast is on Instagram as Orange Blaze Podcast and Facebook as Official Orange Blaze Podcast. If you hike the Florida Trail in 2020 and are finding yourself stranded at home due to the pandemic and you want to chat for a future episode of the podcast, feel free to drop me an email at orangeblazepodcast@gmail.com and we can figure something out. All right, happy hiking and stay healthy, y'all.